The desert plains stretched endlessly as the morning sun cast long shadows across the dust. Chief Running Wolf, the most feared Apache warrior in the territory, noticed it again, the small, trembling foal with protruding ribs trailing his stallion. For 3 days he'd tried to drive it away, but every dawn brought the same sight, those determined eyes following him across miles of unforgiving terrain. Something about its persistence unsettled him. When he finally discovered the worn leather strap around its neck, his weathered hands froze upon the carved name. Memories he'd buried deeper than any arrowhead flooded back. Could this tiny creature truly be connected to his greatest loss? What secret message was this foal carrying across the plains? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Chief Running Wolf sat atop his stallion as the morning sun climbed higher, casting harsh light across the plains. His leathered face, deeply lined with 65 years of survival, remained impassive despite the irritation growing within. The small foal continued trailing behind, its determination a nuisance he couldn't seem to shake. "Go back," he muttered in Apache, his voice a graveled whisper unused to speaking. "There is nothing for you here." The wind carried his words away, unheeded by the trembling creature. Running Wolf's hand instinctively moved to the obsidian knife at his belt, the blade that had taken countless lives during decades of conflict. Men throughout the territory spoke his name in whispers. Chief Running Wolf, the shadow that strikes without mercy. The warrior whose raids left no survivors to tell tales. Yet here he was, unable to drive away a starving foal. He guided Thunder toward a rocky outcropping, hoping difficult terrain might discourage his unwanted companion. The great stallion moved with practiced confidence, navigating the stone path while the foal struggled behind, stumbling yet persistent. At the summit, Running Wolf dismounted and removed his deerskin pouch. Inside lay dried meat, enough for the journey to the ancestral grounds where the council awaited his wisdom. Wisdom. The thought nearly made him laugh. What wisdom had he gained, except that blood flowed the same from all men? From this vantage point, he could see for miles the land his ancestors had walked for generations before the white man brought fences and iron horses. The land where he had earned his name during the raid on Fort Ambrose, where 17 cavalry soldiers had fallen to his arrows and blade. The knife at his side had belonged to his father, and his father before him. Its obsidian edge remained as sharp as the day it was napped, unlike the memories that had begun to dull with age. Only the memories he wished to forget remained crystal clear. The foal's wicker interrupted his thoughts. It had managed the climb and now stood watching him with those unnerving eyes, too knowing for a beast. Running Wolf turned away, feeling the weight of his medicine bundle against his chest. The sacred items that marked him as both spiritual leader and war chief of his people. He had not returned to the village in nearly a moon cycle. His people respected his solitude, understanding that their aging chief required time in communion with the ancestors. What they didn't understand was that Running Wolf sought not wisdom but escape from the weight of eyes that looked to him for guidance when his own path had grown uncertain. In his dreams, the voices of those he had killed formed a chorus that grew louder with each passing season. Age had brought something unexpected: doubt. "I have nothing for you," he said to the foal, surprised to find himself speaking aloud again. "No milk, no mare, no herd. Follow me, and you follow death." The foal took a tentative step closer, ribs clearly visible beneath its dull coat. Its eyes held no fear, only a strange determination that unsettled the old warrior. Animals knew to fear him. Even wolves gave him wide berth, recognizing a more dangerous predator. Running Wolf drew the obsidian blade, its surface catching sunlight like black water. For decades, this knife had been his answer to all problems. One quick motion would end the foal's suffering and his irritation. The blade hung in the air between them, obsidian gleaming with deadly promise. The foal didn't flinch. Instead, it took another step forward, then another, until its muzzle nearly touched the knife's edge. Running Wolf's hand trembled, a weakness he had never known in battle. With a disgusted grunt, he sheathed the blade and turned away. His fingers found the leather pouch at his side, extracting a small portion of dried meat meant for his own consumption. He cast it on the ground before the foal. "Eat, then go. I am not your salvation." The small creature fell upon the offering with desperate hunger. Running Wolf mounted Thunder and rode toward the sacred canyon, not looking back, knowing without seeing that the foal would follow once again when its meager meal was done. By midday, the sun beat down mercilessly. Running Wolf had pushed Thunder harder than usual, hoping to lose the persistent foal in the twisting canyon paths. Yet each time he looked back after navigating a particularly treacherous stretch, the small creature would appear, trembling and exhausted but still following. "Stubborn fool," he muttered, adjusting the hawk feather talisman hanging from his neck. The sacred object had never failed to warn him of approaching danger, its slight movements alerting him to the slightest shift in the wind. Now it hung motionless against his chest, offering no guidance about this strange situation. When he reached the narrow stream cutting through the red rock, Running Wolf dismounted to let Thunder drink. The stallion dipped his head to the cool water, muscles rippling beneath his midnight coat. Years of companionship had forged an understanding between man and horse that required no words. Thunder was the only living creature Running Wolf fully trusted. The sound of stumbling hooves announced the foal's arrival. It stood at a distance, sides heaving, watching the water with desperate longing but unwilling to approach, while Running Wolf stood guard. "You should fear me," Running Wolf said, hand resting on his knife hilt. "All creatures fear me." Yet the foal took a tentative step forward, eyes fixed not on the water but on Running Wolf himself. Its gaze held something the old warrior had not seen directed at him in many years: hope. With an irritated gesture, Running Wolf stepped aside. "Drink, then. If you insist on dying, do it with a full belly." The foal approached the stream cautiously, never taking its eyes off the Apache until the last possible moment. It drank greedily, legs trembling with fatigue. Running Wolf studied the creature properly for the first time. Its coat, beneath the dust and grime, showed hints of unusual coloring, not the solid brown of most wild mustangs, but a pattern reminiscent of the painted horses prized by the Comanche to the east. Around its neck hung the leather strap he'd noticed earlier but had not examined closely. "You are someone's property," he observed. "Someone who did not value you enough to keep you fed." The foal lifted its head, water dripping from its muzzle. For a moment, Running Wolf felt something stir within his chest, a sensation so foreign he almost mistook it for illness. Compassion had no place in a warrior's heart. He had purged such weakness decades ago. Yet when he gathered his belongings and mounted Thunder to continue the journey, he found himself moving at a more measured pace. The thought of stopping for the night came earlier than usual. He selected a sheltered alcove beneath an overhanging rock face. As he built a small fire, he found himself glancing repeatedly at the canyon entrance. Telling himself he was watching for coyotes or other predators, the foal appeared just as the flames took hold, standing at the perimeter of the firelight. Running Wolf pretended not to notice as it edged closer, drawn by warmth and the strange certainty that seemed to guide its actions. In the flickering light, Running Wolf removed the hawk feather talisman from around his neck, holding it before the flames as he whispered the evening prayer. The blue bead caught the firelight, glowing like a star fallen to earth. "Ancestors, guide my path," he murmured in Apache. "Show me why this creature refuses to accept its fate." As if in response, a sudden gust of wind caused the flames to leap. The feather in his hand twisted sharply, pointing directly at the foal before falling still again. Running Wolf's hand tightened around the talisman. In 50 years of wearing it, he had never seen it respond so clearly to his question. The ancestors were seldom so direct in their messages. He tucked the talisman away and reached for his supply pouch, extracting more dried meat and a handful of dried corn. After a moment's hesitation, he placed a small portion on a flat stone at the edge of his camp. then turned his back on both the offering and the foal. Behind him, he heard the soft sound of hooves approaching, then the quiet noises of the foal eating what he had left. Running Wolf kept his back turned, unwilling to acknowledge the significance of his actions or the strange sensation spreading through his chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire before him. "One night," he said to the darkness. "You may stay for one night, then our paths separate." But even as he spoke the words, Running Wolf knew they rang hollow. Something had been set in motion that he did not understand, but could no longer deny. Dawn broke with gentle fingers of light reaching into the canyon. Running Wolf woke instantly, as he had done for decades, senses alert, hand already gripping his knife. Thunder stood nearby, dark eyes watchful. Beside him, curled into a tight ball, lay the foal. Running Wolf exhaled slowly. He had not invited the creature to sleep so close. During the night, it must have edged nearer to the dying embers of his fire, seeking warmth. He rose silently, moving with the practiced stealth that had allowed him to walk unseen among enemies. The foal did not stir, its breathing shallow but steady. Sleep had smoothed away the wariness from its features, revealing just how young it truly was. Perhaps 3 months, no more. Without fully understanding his own actions, Running Wolf knelt beside the sleeping animal. His weathered hand hovered over its neck, where the leather strap lay partially hidden beneath a tangled mane. Something about it had been nagging at his thoughts since he first noticed it. Carefully, he lifted the strap to examine it properly. The leather was well crafted, not the rough work of frontier settlers, but something finer. It had been cut thin and supple, tooled with small decorative marks around the edges, craftsmanship that spoke of care and attention. And there, hanging from the leather like a talisman, was a small silver arrowhead. Running Wolf's fingers froze. The air in his lungs seemed to solidify as recognition dawned. He had crafted this arrowhead himself, 20 summers ago, had shaped it from trader's silver, worked it with patience and precision, unusual for a warrior accustomed to more brutal crafts. He had given it to only one person. The foal stirred beneath his touch, eyes blinking open. Running Wolf withdrew his hand as if burned, rising to his feet in one fluid motion. His heart hammered against his ribs with a force he had not felt since his youth. "Impossible," he whispered, but there it was. And now, examining the strap more carefully, he could see what he had missed before. Carved into the leather in letters he had learned to recognize long ago was a name: Spirit Dancer. The name struck him like a physical blow. Memories he had buried beneath years of determined forgetting rose to the surface of his mind. A painted mare, dappled like the shadows of leaves on forest ground. A gift he had given to a woman with eyes the color of the summer sky. A woman whose name he had not allowed himself to speak for 20 years. "Sarah," he said, the syllables unfamiliar on his tongue after so long. The foal scrambled to its feet at the sound of his voice, shaking dust from its coat. In the clear morning light, Running Wolf could see what exhaustion and grime had previously obscured. The distinctive pattern emerging on its hide, dappled shadows that would one day mirror the coat of its mother or grandmother, Spirit Dancer's bloodline. But how? And why now? Sarah Blackwood had vanished from his life 2 decades ago after the raid that had shattered the fragile peace between his people and the settlers. He had believed her dead all this time, had forced himself to believe it rather than face the alternative. Running Wolf turned away, hands clenched into fists at his sides. He had spent 20 years building walls around these memories, and now they threatened to collapse with the weight of questions he had no answers for. The foal approached cautiously, nudging at his closed fist with its muzzle. The gesture held such gentle trust that Running Wolf felt something crack within his chest. "What message do you bring, little one?" he asked softly in Apache. "What ghost sends you to haunt me?" His eyes fell on the small pool of water gathered in a rock hollow nearby. The foal would need to drink before they continued their journey. He hesitated, then corrected himself before he continued his journey. He had no obligation to this creature, this phantom from his past. Yet when he gathered his few possessions and mounted Thunder, he found himself leading them not along his planned route to the tribal council, but toward the west, toward a small spring he knew lay half a day's ride away. A place where the water ran sweet and clear, where grass grew in sufficient abundance to feed a starving foal. "Come then," he said, not looking back to see if the foal followed. "Let us find you water." As Thunder picked his way down the canyon path, Running Wolf heard the now familiar sound of small hooves scrambling to keep pace. The silver arrowhead gleamed in the morning sun, a beacon from a past he could no longer outrun. The spring bubbled from between moss-covered stones, creating a small paradise in the otherwise harsh landscape. Running Wolf watched as the foal drank deeply, its coat gleaming with new strength after 2 days of regular water and the small portions of food he had shared from his own supplies. He sat with his back against a cottonwood tree, fingers absently tracing the designs carved into his medicine pouch. Inside, wrapped in soft rabbit fur, lay an object he had not touched in 20 summers, a small flute carved from eagle bone. He had played it for Sarah on nights when the moon hung low and silver over the plains. She had called his music the voice of the wind given form. Her eyes closed as the notes drifted around them in their secret meeting place. Running Wolf closed his eyes, allowing the memory to surface fully for the first time in decades. They had met by accident, he scouting the boundaries of Apache territory, she gathering plants for her father's medicinal experiments. Instead of fear, she had shown curiosity. Instead of reaching for his weapon, he had found himself answering her questions. "Why do you follow me?" he asked the foal, which had finished drinking and now grazed on the tender grass near the spring. "What does she want from me after all this time?" The foal lifted its head, regarding him with those unsettlingly intelligent eyes, but offered no answers. That night, as the stars emerged in the vast desert sky, Running Wolf found himself reaching into his medicine pouch. His fingers closed around the bone flute, cool and smooth against his skin. He had not intended to take it out, had not played a note since the day he believed Sarah had died in the raid. Yet now he raised it to his lips, a single plaintive note escaping before he could reconsider. The foal's ears perked immediately, its attention fixed on Running Wolf with new intensity. "You know this sound," Running Wolf said softly, lowering the flute. "How is that possible?" He played again, a simple melody that had once been Sarah's favorite. The foal approached slowly, drawn by the music in a way that could not be coincidence. It stopped before him, nostrils flared, breathing in his scent along with the notes that hung in the evening air. Running Wolf's playing faltered as understanding dawned. "She played this for you. She kept the songs." The music had bridged cultures once before, the Apache warrior and the settler woman finding common ground in the universal language of melody. Now it connected him to this small creature, this messenger from a past he had tried to bury. He played until the moon rose high, ancient songs of his people mixed with the gentler tunes he had created for Sarah. The foal settled beside him, closer than it had ever ventured before, head lowered in what almost appeared to be contentment. When the final notes faded, Running Wolf returned the flute to his pouch. Tomorrow they would need to move on. His people expected him at the council, and his supplies would not last if he continued to share them. Yet as he spread his blanket near the dying fire, Running Wolf knew his path had already changed. The council would have to wait. First he needed to understand what message was being carried by this persistent foal with its silver arrowhead and carved name. In the morning, he awoke to find the foal standing at the edge of their camp, facing eastward with unusual focus. When Running Wolf rose, it whickered softly, taking several steps in that direction, before looking back at him expectantly. "You wish me to follow you now?" Running Wolf asked, a touch of wry amusement in his voice. "Have our roles reversed so quickly?" The foal merely continued looking at him, then east again, with unmistakable purpose. Running Wolf considered the direction. East would take them away from tribal lands, toward the territories where settlements had begun to encroach years ago. Toward where Sarah's family had once established their homestead. As he gathered his belongings and prepared Thunder for riding, Running Wolf found the decision had already been made. 20 years ago, he had ridden away from Sarah's life, believing it better for both of them. Now something was calling him back. "Very well, little one," he said, mounting Thunder with the fluid grace that belied his years. "Lead and I will follow." The foal needed no further encouragement. With new energy in its step, it set out eastward, occasionally looking back to ensure the Apache warrior followed. For the first time since the foal had appeared behind his horse 3 days earlier, Running Wolf did not resist its presence. Instead, he urged Thunder forward. The bone flute secure in his medicine pouch and an unfamiliar sensation stirring in his chest, the first tentative awakening of hope. The landscape changed gradually as they traveled east. Stark desert gave way to rolling grasslands, dotted with mesquite and occasional stands of cottonwood, marking hidden water sources. Running Wolf recognized landmarks he had not seen in 2 decades, a distinctive rock formation shaped like a sleeping warrior, a lightning-struck oak that somehow still clung to life. By midday of the second day, he knew they were approaching the old Blackwood homestead. The knowledge settled like a weight in his chest, growing heavier with each mile. From his saddlebag, he withdrew a small leather pouch different from his medicine bundle. This one contained no sacred items, no objects of power. Inside was something far more dangerous, a single scorched page torn from a Bible, rescued impulsively during the chaos of the raid all those years ago. The page contained handwritten records of the Blackwood family. Births, deaths, marriages recorded in careful script. Sarah's name was there, her birth date noted in her mother's handwriting. Running Wolf had taught himself to read the English letters during his time with Sarah, enough to recognize the names, if not all the surrounding words. He had kept this remnant for reasons he could not explain, even to himself. Perhaps as proof that she had existed. Perhaps as penance. He returned the page to its hiding place as they crested a small rise. The foal had been leading them unerringly, and now it stopped, looking back at Running Wolf, with what could only be described as expectation. Below them lay a shallow valley. Once it had contained the Blackwood homestead, a sturdy cabin, a barn, fenced pastures for livestock. Now only the stone foundation of the cabin remained, along with the charred remnants of support beams reaching toward the sky like accusing fingers. Running Wolf sat motionless atop Thunder, memories washing over him in waves. He had not been present for the raid, had been miles away when warriors from a rival band attacked the settlement in retaliation for cattle thieves who had stolen their herd. By the time he learned of it, the damage had been done. He had come here afterward, searching through the ruins for any sign of Sarah. Finding none, he had assumed the worst. The scorched Bible page had been his only token, taken in a moment of grief before he rode away, vowing never to return. The foal whickered softly, breaking his reverie. It had started down the slope toward the ruins. After a moment's hesitation, Running Wolf followed. The foundation stones were still solid, blackened in places but standing firm. Nature had begun to reclaim the homestead, grass growing between the stones, wildflowers blooming where once a garden had been carefully tended. A young cottonwood had taken root near where the well had been dug. Running Wolf dismounted, allowing Thunder to graze while he examined the site. The destruction was old, the ashes long since blown away by prairie winds. Yet something felt different from what he remembered. Small changes that suggested human presence more recent than 20 years past. The foal moved with purpose toward the remains of the barn, where a few weathered posts still stood. As Running Wolf followed, he noticed fresh-cut wood among the old, repairs made to create a crude shelter within the original footprint of the building. Inside, he found signs of occasional habitation, a fire pit with relatively recent ashes, a small store of firewood stacked neatly against one wall, a sleeping pallet of woven grass covered with a canvas tarp. Someone returns here, he murmured, kneeling to examine the fire pit. Not to live, but to remember. The foal had moved to a particular corner of the structure, pawing at the earth with increasing urgency. Running Wolf joined it, noticing that the ground there appeared to have been disturbed and resettled multiple times. He began to dig with his hands, the soil giving way easily to reveal a small metal box buried just below the surface. It was a cash box of the type settlers used to store valuables, its once bright surface now dulled with age and exposure. Running Wolf hesitated, his hand hovering over the box. Whatever it contained had been deliberately hidden, meant perhaps for specific eyes. Did he have the right to uncover secrets that might not be intended for him? The foal nudged his shoulder insistently. "This is why you brought me here," Running Wolf said softly. It wasn't a question. With careful movements, he lifted the box from its shallow grave and opened the rusted latch. Inside lay a folded piece of paper, a small cloth pouch, and a lock of golden hair, tied with faded blue ribbon. His hands trembled as he unfolded the paper, revealing a letter written in a painfully familiar hand, Sarah's flowing script, each curve and line as recognizable to him as the patterns of stars in the night sky. The first words struck him like a physical blow. "My dearest Wolf, if you are reading this, then the impossible has happened. You have found your way back to me at last." Running Wolf's hands trembled as he read Sarah's letter, her voice seeming to rise from the faded paper and fill the silent ruins around him. "My dearest Wolf, if you are reading this, then the impossible has happened. You have found your way back to me at last. I never stopped believing you would. Though the years have grown long in waiting, I survived the raid. When your people came, I hid beneath the floorboards where we once stored winter preserves. I heard everything, the screams, the fire consuming all we had built. I thought surely you had perished as well, until a moon later when I heard whispers of the great chief Running Wolf still leading his people. Why did you not come for me? Perhaps you believed, as I did, that I had died that day. Perhaps you chose the welfare of your tribe over one white woman. Or perhaps the love I cherished was not returned with equal measure. It matters little now. What matters is what I could not tell you before the raid. I was carrying your child." Running Wolf stopped reading, the paper shaking violently in his grip. His child. The words echoed in his mind like thunder across the plains. He had never known, had never suspected. The foal nudged him gently, urging him to continue. "I bore the child alone, shunned by my own kind for carrying an Apache baby. When my time came, there were complications. I could find no midwife who would attend me. The child, our daughter, was born still and silent. A sound escaped Running Wolf's throat, primal and raw. The grief he had never been allowed to feel crashed over him like a flash flood, carving new channels through the hardened landscape of his heart. The foal whickered softly and moved away from the barn, clearly expecting Running Wolf to follow. He rose on unsteady legs, still clutching Sarah's letter. Thunder watched with dark, knowing eyes as his master followed the persistent foal away from the homestead ruins toward a small rise crowned with a solitary juniper tree. As they approached, Running Wolf saw what the overgrown grass had hidden from view at a distance, a small wooden cross, weathered by years of sun and storm but still standing. It was crafted from cedar, resistant to rot, and carved with symbols that made his breath catch in his throat. Christian crosses intertwined with Apache protection symbols, a merging of faiths much like the child who lay beneath. Running Wolf fell to his knees before the grave, one hand reaching out to touch the rough wood. How many times had Sarah come here alone to speak to their lost child? How many tears had fallen on this sacred ground while he remained ignorant, believing himself alone in his pain? "I am here," he whispered in Apache, then repeated the words in English as Sarah had taught him. "I am here at last." From his medicine pouch, he withdrew items needed for the burial ritual his people performed: sage for purification, tobacco as an offering to the spirits, and a small piece of obsidian for protection on the journey to the other side. With practiced movements, he prepared each item, whispering prayers in his native tongue as the sage smoke curled around him. Running Wolf sang the Apache death song, his deep voice carrying across the empty plains. It was a song meant to guide the spirit home, to help it find peace among the ancestors. He had sung it many times for fallen warriors, but never before with such personal anguish, never for his own blood. The foal stood nearby, watching with solemn eyes as Running Wolf completed the ritual. When the last notes of the death song faded into silence, he remained kneeling, unable to leave this place now that he had found it. "I would have come," he said to the small grave. "Had I known, I would have come through fire and death to find you both." As the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, Running Wolf finally rose. There was more to Sarah's letter he had not yet read, more truths to uncover. But first, he needed to honor his child properly, in the Apache way. He gathered stones from around the homestead, carrying them one by one to create a protective circle around the grave. Each stone represented a prayer, a blessing, a promise that this child, his daughter, would never again be without her father's protection. Even in death, night had fallen by the time he finished, his body aching with exertion and grief. The foal had remained, watching his labor with patient eyes. Now it approached the completed stone circle and lowered its head, as if paying its own respects. "You knew," Running Wolf said softly to the animal. "Somehow you knew to bring me here first." The foal lifted its head, eyes reflecting starlight. Then it turned, moving with deliberate steps back toward the barn, where Sarah's letter waited to reveal whatever other secrets the years had kept hidden from him. Running Wolf followed, glancing back once more at the small grave outlined in stone. No longer abandoned, no longer forgotten. "I will return," he promised. "Every day, until I understand why I have been called back to this place of sorrow." Dawn broke with gentle persistence, light seeping across the plains like water filling a shallow basin. Running Wolf had not slept. He sat beside the small fire he had built in the remains of the barn. Sarah's letter spread before him on a flat stone. Its contents now seared into his memory. The truth had unfolded in her careful script, each revelation more painful than the last. Not one child, but two, twins. A boy and a girl who never drew breath in this world, born too early and without proper care. From the small cloth pouch found with the letter, Running Wolf had withdrawn two tiny objects that now lay in his weathered palm, a pair of miniature moccasins crafted with painstaking care. One was decorated with symbols of strength, the traditional markings for an Apache warrior. The other bore symbols of wisdom, meant for a daughter of the tribe. Sarah had made them in hope during the months she carried their children. She remembered the ways, he murmured, fingers tracing the intricate beadwork. "She kept our traditions, even when I abandoned mine." The foal had remained close through the night, as if sensing his need for companionship in the darkness of grief. Now it rose from where it had rested, shaking dust from its coat before moving with deliberate steps toward the door of the barn. Running Wolf understood. There was more to see, more to learn. He tucked the tiny moccasins carefully into his medicine pouch and followed. The animal led him back toward the juniper tree, where he had found the single grave marker. But instead of stopping there, it continued past, heading toward a small depression beyond. As Running Wolf followed, he noticed what he had missed in the fading light of the previous evening, a second wooden cross, partially concealed by tall grass that had grown around it. He fell to his knees beside this second marker, breath caught in his throat. Like the first, it combined Christian and Apache symbols. But the carvings were less weathered, the wood showing fewer signs of age. "She returned," Running Wolf whispered, understanding dawning like the rising sun. She came back to this place. Sarah's letter had explained that after losing the twins, she had fled the homestead, unable to bear the memories it held. She had traveled east, seeking a new life among people who knew nothing of her past. The letter had been written years later, during a brief return to bury something precious and leave her message in hopes he might someday find it. But this second grave showed she had returned again after writing that letter. had continued to visit this place of sorrows. With gentle hands, Running Wolf cleared away the overgrown grass from the second marker, revealing a small stone placed at its base. Unlike the rough stones he had gathered the previous day, this one had been carefully shaped and smoothed, with words etched into its surface. "My son, your father's spirit lives in you." A sound escaped Running Wolf's throat, part groan, part prayer. He placed one hand on each grave, forming a physical connection between the three of them, father, daughter, son, united at last after decades of separation. The morning light strengthened, casting his shadow across both small graves. Running Wolf remained motionless, allowing grief its full measure. He had lost so much without ever knowing it existed. The woman he had loved, the children they had created, the life that might have been. When he finally spoke, it was in the ceremonial language of his people, words reserved for the most sacred occasions. "I name you," he said to the first grave. "Morning Star, daughter of Running Wolf and Sarah Blackwood, child of two worlds. May your spirit dance among the ancestors until we meet again." To the second grave he whispered, "I name you Strong Elk, son of Running Wolf and Sarah Blackwood, warrior who never knew battle. May your courage guide your journey through the spirit lands." The foal approached, standing between the two graves with quiet dignity. For the first time, Running Wolf noticed a pattern emerging on its coat as it shed its winter hair, dappled patches that would one day form the distinctive markings Sarah had described on the mare spirit. "Dancer, you are their legacy," Running Wolf said softly to the animal. "A continuation of what we created together." He rose slowly, muscles stiff from hours of kneeling. The grief remained, a weight he would carry always, but something else had emerged alongside it, a sense of purpose. Sarah had returned to this place more than once. The second grave was newer. There were supplies stored in the barn. She might have survived. Running Wolf looked to the horizon, where the sun now cleared the distant hills. If Sarah lived, he would find her. If she had died, he would learn where and how. The journey that had begun with a persistent foal following his horse had become a quest for answers, for redemption, for the family he had never known he had. "Show me," he said to the foal. "Show me where to go next." Henderson's trading post stood at the crossroads where settler territory met the open plains, a weathered wooden structure with a wide porch and hitching posts worn smooth by years of use. For 2 decades, it had served as neutral ground where different worlds could meet in uneasy commerce. Running Wolf approached with caution, Thunder's hooves stirring dust in the morning light. The foal followed closely, seemingly untroubled by their destination. He had wrapped his distinctive medicine bundle inside a plain cloth and concealed his knife. Though peace had largely held in recent years, an Apache warrior approaching a white establishment alone invited danger. He tethered Thunder at a distance from the main hitching posts, murmuring for the stallion to stand guard. The foal remained by his side as he approached the trading post, back straight, eyes alert for any sign of threat. The door creaked open before he reached it. A man stepped onto the porch, tall and lean, with a shock of white hair beneath a battered hat. His face was deeply lined, skin tanned to leather by decades under the desert sun. "Thought I felt eyes on the place," the man said, voice gravelled by age and tobacco. He made no move toward the rifle that hung on pegs beside the door. Instead, he raised a gnarled hand in greeting. "Been a long time, Chief." Running Wolf halted, surprise momentarily displacing his usual caution. "Henderson, figured you for dead these past 15 years, the trader said, chewing on the stem of an unlit pipe. "Most of your generation are. Yet here we stand, old men both." Henderson's weathered face creased in what might have been a smile. "That we do." His gaze dropped to the foal, standing calmly beside Running Wolf. "Found you, did he?" The question struck Running Wolf like a physical blow. "You know of this animal?" Henderson nodded slowly. "Come inside. Some conversations aren't meant for open air." Running Wolf hesitated, decades of caution warring with the need for answers. Finally, he mounted the 3 wooden steps to the porch, the Foal following without hesitation. The interior of the trading post smelled of tobacco, leather, and the countless items that filled its shelves: tools, preserved foods, bolts of cloth, ammunition. A pot-bellied stove stood cold in one corner, flanked by 2 worn chairs. Henderson moved behind a rough-hewn counter and reached beneath it, producing not a weapon, but a leather-bound book. He placed it on the counter with careful hands, as if the object held particular significance. "Trading post ledger," he explained, opening the weathered cover. "Every transaction for 20 years. Who bought what, when, for how much?" Running Wolf approached slowly. "Why show me this?" Henderson's finger traced down a page of careful notations before stopping at an entry dated 15 years earlier. Sarah Blackwood. Purchased coffee, sugar, flour, ammunition for Winchester rifle. 2 blankets, seeds for planting, running. Wolf's hand trembled as he reached out to touch the writing, the same flowing script as the letter he had found buried at the homestead. "She survived," he whispered. "More than survived," Henderson said, turning pages. "Came through here regular for almost 10 years after the raid. Rebuilt part of the homestead, though she lived in town mostly. Taught at the school in New Hope Settlement." More entries appeared under Sarah's name: supplies, books, occasionally medicines. Her life documented in purchases and trades, continuing long after Running Wolf had believed her dead. "When did you last see her?" he asked, voice rough with emotion. Henderson turned to the final pages of the ledger. 3 months ago. Wasn't well by then. The consumption had taken hold, something fierce. He pointed to a final entry in a hand shakier than the earlier ones. "Her last purchase. Wasn't much. Coffee, sugar, a length of leather strap." Running Wolf's gaze fixed on the date. "The leather for the foal." Henderson nodded. "She bred horses, you know, good ones. Had a special line she kept separate from the others. Said they had Apache spirit in their blood." The old trader's eyes crinkled. "Guess she wasn't wrong. The mare I gave her," Running Wolf said softly. "Spirit dancer. That's the one. This little fellow's grandmother or great-grandmother, I expect." Henderson closed the ledger with reverent care. "Sarah left something else. Made me swear I'd keep it until either you came looking or 10 years passed, whichever came first." From beneath the counter, Henderson withdrew a small oilskin package tied with twine. "She knew you'd come eventually, though I had my doubts. Said the horse would find you, bring you back." He held out the package. "Said when you came, I was to tell you, what was lost can sometimes be found again." Running Wolf accepted the package, its weight insignificant in his hands, yet somehow heavier than all his weapons combined. "Is she—" He couldn't finish the question. Henderson's face softened with rare compassion. "She was dying when I last saw her. Headed for New Hope Settlement. That's where you'll find your answers, Chief. It's 2 days' ride east of here." He nodded toward the foal. "He knows the way." Outside, mounting Thunder with the package secured inside his shirt, Running Wolf looked down at the small animal that had altered the course of his life in less than a week. The foal gazed back, eyes bright with what now seemed unmistakably like purpose. "New Hope," Running Wolf said, tasting the irony of the name on his tongue. "Lead on, little one. Lead on." Miles from Henderson's trading post, Running Wolf made camp beside a small stream. The sun hung low on the horizon, painting the landscape in hues of amber and gold. He had ridden hard since leaving the trading post, driven by an urgency he had not felt in decades. Now, with the camp established and Thunder grazing nearby, Running Wolf finally allowed himself to open the oilskin package Henderson had given him. His fingers worked carefully, unwrapping the protective layers to reveal a small leather journal and a silver locket on a delicate chain. The locket drew his attention first. It was an item he recognized, a simple silver oval he had traded 4 prime beaver pelts to obtain from a passing merchant long before the raid. He had given it to Sarah on the night they had pledged themselves to each other under the watchful eyes of the stars. With weathered fingers that suddenly seemed too large and clumsy for such delicate work, Running Wolf opened the locket. Inside lay a small braided lock of hair, golden strands intertwined with black. Their hair, braided together as they had once promised to braid their lives. He remembered the night they had exchanged these tokens, using his knife to cut a lock of his hair, watching as she did the same with her sewing scissors. They had braided the strands together, then carefully placed them in the locket, a private ceremony of their own creation, neither fully Apache nor white, but something new that belonged only to them. Running Wolf closed his eyes, the locket clutched tightly in his palm. She had kept it all these years, had worn it next to her heart while carrying their children, while rebuilding her life, while growing old without him. The foal approached silently, nudging his shoulder with gentle insistence. Running Wolf opened his eyes to find it watching him, its gaze somber in the fading light. "I know," he said softly. "There is more to see." He turned his attention to the journal, bound in soft leather that bore the marks of frequent handling. Opening it carefully, he found pages filled with Sarah's handwriting, not a continuous narrative, but entries dated sporadically across years. "Addressed to him, my dearest Wolf," began the first entry, dated 2 years after the raid. "Today I felt strong enough to return to our place beneath the juniper tree. I brought flowers for the children and spoke their names aloud so they would not be forgotten. I told them about their father, his courage, his gentle hands, his eyes that saw beyond the color of my skin. I want them to know you, even in the spirit world." Running Wolf's vision blurred. He blinked away the moisture, unwilling to miss a single word Sarah had written to him across the void of years. He read on, moving through time with each entry. Sarah's journey from the shattered homestead to New Hope settlement, her struggle to establish herself as the schoolteacher despite whispers about her past, her decision to breed horses, starting with the mare he had given her. "Spirit dancer has foaled," read an entry from 4 years after the raid. "A strong filly with her mother's markings and her father's spirit. I've named her Whispered Promise, for she represents all that we once promised each other under the stars." The entries continued, chronicling years that Running Wolf had spent leading his people, fighting enemies, growing increasingly distant from the man he had once been with Sarah. While he had hardened his heart against memory, she had kept faith with their shared past. An entry from 15 years after the raid made his breath catch. "I dreamt of you last night, my wolf, not the fierce warrior others fear, but the man who taught me to track deer through the forest, who played his bone flute under the moon, who whispered Apache legends against my hair. In my dream, you were not alone. Standing beside you was a young woman with your eyes and my smile. Our daughter, grown to womanhood. I woke weeping, for what might have been had our stars aligned differently." Running Wolf closed the journal, unable to read more as night descended around him. The words burned in his mind, each one a spark igniting memories he had buried beneath years of determined forgetting. The foal settled beside him, its warmth a silent comfort in the gathering darkness. Running Wolf placed his hand on its neck, feeling the steady pulse of life beneath his palm. "She never stopped loving me," he whispered, wonder and grief mingling in his voice. "All those years, while I tried to forget her name, she held me in her heart." The silver locket gleamed in the firelight, the physical embodiment of a bond that had endured across 2 decades of separation. Running Wolf slipped the chain over his head, letting the locket rest against his chest, where his medicine bundle usually hung. Tomorrow, they would continue to New Hope settlement, following the path Sarah had taken so many times before. Tomorrow, he would learn if she still lived, still breathed, still remembered the man he had been before grief and duty hardened him beyond recognition. Tonight, beneath stars that had witnessed their love so many years ago, Running Wolf allowed himself to remember fully for the first time, not just the pain of loss, but the joy that had preceded it, the sound of Sarah's laughter, the feel of her hand in his, the future they had planned in whispered conversations that seemed now like dreams from another life. "I am coming, Sarah," he said to the night sky. "At last, I am coming." New hope rose from the prairie like a declaration, wooden buildings standing firm against the elements, streets laid out in orderly rows, a white steeple punctuating the skyline. Running Wolf observed from a distant ridge, measuring the settlement with experienced eyes. Larger than he had expected, established, permanent. He had traded his distinctive Apache garments for simpler attire, purchased from Henderson. Cotton shirt, worn trousers, battered hat pulled low over his features. The transformation would not fool close inspection, but might allow him to approach without immediately triggering alarm. "Wait here," he instructed Thunder, securing the stallion in a sheltered drawer with access to water. The foal, however, refused to stay behind, trotting determinedly at his side as he began the approach to New Hope. Running Wolf noted defensive positions, escape routes, patterns of movement within the settlement, old habits of a warrior entering potentially hostile territory. Yet his purpose was not warfare, but something far more daunting, finding traces of a woman who had carried his memory for 20 years. The settlement's main street bustled with midday activity, wagons loaded with supplies, children darting between buildings, women carrying baskets of goods from the general store. Running Wolf kept his head down, moving with deliberate purpose toward the livery stable, where he might find information without drawing undue attention. The foal had other ideas. It suddenly changed direction, cutting across the street toward a two-story wooden structure with large windows. A sign above the door read, "New Hope School." "No," Running Wolf murmured, but the foal ignored him, approaching the schoolhouse with unmistakable familiarity. A bell rang, the clear tone carrying across the settlement, and children began pouring from the building, their voices raised in the universal sounds of youth released from lessons. Running Wolf hesitated, torn between retreating to safety and following the foal's lead. Before he could decide, an elderly Chinese woman emerged from the schoolhouse, watching the children disperse with a fond expression. Her gaze shifted, caught by the unusual sight of the foal standing expectantly at the bottom of the steps. Her eyes widened in recognition, then lifted to find Running Wolf. For a long moment, they regarded each other across the busy street, an Apache warrior in borrowed clothes, and a Chinese woman in a neat dark dress with a white collar. Neither moved until the foal whickered softly, breaking the tableau. The woman nodded once, decisively, then turned and re-entered the schoolhouse. Leaving the door open behind her, Running Wolf crossed the street, aware of curious glances, but focused solely on the open door and what waited beyond. The foal preceded him up the steps and through the entrance without hesitation. Inside, the schoolroom stood empty of children, but full of evidence of their presence. Slates with half-erased writing, books stacked neatly on shelves, a collection of rocks and pressed flowers arranged on a table by the window. At the front of the room, mounted on a special shelf, sat a small brass bell, polished to a warm glow and displayed like an object of significance. The Chinese woman waited beside the bell, her posture straight despite her advanced years. Up close, Running Wolf could see the intelligence in her dark eyes, the quiet strength in her bearing. "You came," she said simply. "She said you would." Running Wolf removed his hat, revealing the gray-streaked hair still worn in the traditional style of an Apache chief. "You knew Sarah. I am Li Wei Chen. Sarah Blackwood was my dearest friend for 18 years. Her hand reached out to touch the brass bell. This was hers. She rang it each morning to call the children to lessons. Running Wolf approached slowly, drawn to this object that Sarah had touched daily for years. A small brass plaque mounted beneath the bell caught his attention. "In honor of Sarah Blackwood, who taught our children wisdom and compassion for 15 years. May her spirit continue to guide New Hope." The past tense struck him like a physical blow. "She has walked on," Li Wei nodded, compassion softening her features. 6 weeks ago. The consumption took her quickly at the end, which was a mercy. Running Wolf closed his eyes, grief washing through him anew. Too late. After 20 years of separation, he had come too late. "She spoke of you," Li Wei continued, "in her final days, When the fever loosened her tongue, she spoke of her Apache warrior with the eyes of a hawk and the heart of a poet. I thought perhaps she was confused with age and illness. She studied him with newfound understanding. But she saw clearly, even at the end. "I need to know everything," Running Wolf said, his voice rough with emotion. How she lived. Where she rests. If she left, he hesitated. If she left any message for me, Li Wei's expression softened further. "Come to my home this evening." "It is not safe for you here in daylight. Too many curious eyes." She glanced at the foal, which had moved to stand beside the bell, its presence somehow fitting in this place where Sarah had spent so many years. "Bring your young guide. There is much to tell, and some things that can only be shown." She reached into her pocket and withdrew a small key, pressing it into Running Wolf's palm. "Sarah's house still stands at the edge of town. This will open the door. Go there at dusk, when fewer people will notice your coming and going. I will join you after sunset." Running Wolf's fingers closed around the key, a tangible connection to Sarah's life in this place, to the home where she had lived without him. "Thank you." "Do not thank me yet," Li Wei cautioned, her expression growing somber. "Not all truths are easy to bear, Chief Running Wolf, and Sarah's final. Truth may shake the very ground beneath your feet." Sarah's house stood apart from the others, a modest cabin nestled against a stand of cottonwoods at the eastern edge of New Hope. Running Wolf approached as dusk gathered, shadows lengthening across the neatly tended garden that surrounded the dwelling. The foal trotted ahead with the confidence of familiarity, stopping at the small porch as if waiting for permission to enter. The key turned smoothly in the lock. Running Wolf hesitated at the threshold, suddenly overwhelmed by the significance of this moment, entering the space where Sarah had lived her daily life, breathed her last breath, existed without him for 20 years. Inside, the cabin was neat and simply furnished, a table with 4 chairs, a small stove, shelves lined with books, a rocking chair beside the window with a faded quilt draped across it. Everything spoke of Sarah, her practicality, her appreciation for beauty in small things, her solitude. Running Wolf moved through the space with reverence, touching nothing, absorbing everything. A pressed flower framed on the wall, a collection of children's drawings pinned beside the stove, a walking stick with intricate carvings leaning in one corner. The foal entered behind him, moving with purpose toward a partially open door at the rear of the main room. Running Wolf followed, finding himself in a small bedroom. A narrow bed with a patchwork quilt, a chest at its foot, a small table beside the bed. On the table sat a clay pipe, simple in design, reddish-brown in color. Running Wolf reached for it with a trembling hand. He had carved this pipe himself from clay, found near the river where they used to meet. Had taught Sarah the sacred rituals of tobacco, the prayers that rose with the smoke to reach the ancestors. She had kept it all these years, not displayed like a curiosity, but placed where she would see it upon waking and before sleeping, a daily remembrance. A soft knock at the front door pulled him from his reverie. Li Wei-chen entered without waiting for response, carrying a wooden box in her arms. She found him still standing in the bedroom, the pipe cradled in his palm. "She used it," Li Wei said softly. "Not often, but on certain days. The children's birthdays. The anniversary of the raid. The day she believed was your birthday, though she was never certain she had calculated it correctly from your descriptions of the season." Running Wolf carefully returned the pipe to its place of honor. "You said there was more to tell." Li Wei nodded, moving back to the main room where she placed the wooden box on the table. Sarah left instructions. Specific items for specific people. "This box is for you." She opened it, revealing dozens of folded papers, letters, their edges softened with age and handling. On the topmost was written simply, "For Running Wolf, should he ever return." "She wrote to you," Li Wei explained. "For 20 years she wrote letters she never sent. Some she read to the little ones at their graves when she visited. Others she kept private even from me." She gestured to the box. "Her final wish was that you should have them all." Running Wolf lifted the first letter with careful hands, unfolding paper that crackled with age. "My dearest Wolf," it began, dated 3 months after the raid. "Today I buried our children beneath the juniper tree. I carved crosses with symbols you taught me to guide their spirits safely to the ancestors. I sang the lullaby you once played on your bone flute, though my voice broke before the end. I do not know if you live or die, but I speak your name to our little ones, so they will know their father in the spirit world." He refolded the letter with unsteady fingers, unable to read more in Li Wei's presence. The raw grief it contained was too intimate, too sacred to share. "There is something else you should know," Li Wei said, her voice gentle but firm. "Sarah did not live here alone all these years." Running Wolf looked up sharply. "She married," Li Wei nodded, 10 years after the raid. "A good man named Thomas Miller, a widower with 2 young sons needing a mother. The news should have pained him, yet Running Wolf felt only a complex relief. Sarah had found companionship, had not spent all those years in solitude. He died 5 years ago," Li Wei continued. "Thrown from a horse while checking fence lines. Sarah mourned him deeply, but she never stopped writing your letters." She hesitated, choosing her next words carefully. "There is more to tell, but not tonight. Read her words first. Come to my home tomorrow at midday. The final piece of Sarah's story requires proper preparation." Li Wei moved toward the door, then paused. "You may stay here. No one will disturb you. Sarah made arrangements before her passing. This house and all it contains belong to you now." After she left, Running Wolf sat at the table surrounded by 20 years of Sarah's thoughts. Feelings, experiences, her life distilled into words meant only for him. The Foal settled on a braided rug nearby, watching with those knowing eyes as he unfolded the second letter. "My dearest Wolf, today I felt our daughter move within me for the first time." Running Wolf's head snapped up, confusion washing over him. This letter was dated before the raid, before the twins were born and died. He quickly checked the next letter, dated years later. "My dearest Wolf, Aita took her first steps today. She has your determination." The letters slipped from his fingers as understanding dawned. Not all the children had died. Somewhere in these pages lay a truth that would indeed shake the very ground beneath his feet. Dawn found Running Wolf still at Sarah's table, surrounded by unfolded letters, his eyes red-rimmed from a night without sleep. He had read each one, absorbing 20 years of Sarah's life through her own words, piecing together a story that left him shaken to his core. The truth had unfolded across the pages in Sarah's flowing script. She had been carrying twins when the raid occurred, but against all odds, one child had survived. A daughter born 2 months after Running Wolf rode away, believing Sarah dead. While the son had been stillborn, the girl had fought for life and prevailed. Sarah had named her Aita, first to dance, in Cherokee, the closest she could come to Apache, without knowing the proper words. She had raised the child in secret for 5 years, telling curious townsfolk that Aita was the orphaned daughter of her cousin. When Thomas Miller came into their lives, he had accepted Aita as his own, giving her his name and his protection in a world hostile to half Apache children. Together, they had moved to New Hope for a fresh start where no one knew their history. Running Wolf rose stiffly, his body protesting the night spent hunched over the letters. The Foal watched from its place on the rug, patient as always. Outside, the settlement was coming to life. Sounds of morning activities filtering through the windows. On a shelf near Sarah's bed, Running Wolf had found the final piece that brought her story into Uvocus, a carefully drawn star chart marking the constellations as they had appeared. On the night he and Sarah had pledged themselves to each other. She had marked their stars, the bright points they had each chosen as their celestial representatives, and drawn a line connecting them across the heavens. It was a promise he had made that night, with the stars as witness. "Even when we are apart," he had told her, "our stars remain connected. Follow their line, and you will always find your way back to me." She had taken his words literally, preserving the exact pattern of stars from that sacred night, using it perhaps to teach their daughter about her heritage. About the father she had never known, a daughter who still lived. Running Wolf carefully folded the star chart and placed it in his shirt pocket, next to his heart. Then he gathered the most important letters, those that spoke of Aita's life and development, and secured them as well. The rest he returned to the wooden box, a treasure he would revisit in time. The foal rose as Running Wolf prepared to leave, stretching its legs as if in anticipation of the day ahead. It had been present throughout many of Sarah's letters, the special line of horses she had bred from Spirit Dancer. Maintaining the bloodline that connected to the mare Running Wolf had given her. This foal, he now understood, was the culmination of that breeding program. Born to Spirit Dancer's granddaughter just months before Sarah's death, it had been trained specifically to find him, to lead him back to the family he never knew existed. Running Wolf stepped outside, blinking in the bright morning light. According to Sarah's final letters, Aita had married a rancher named James Cooper 5 years earlier. They lived a half-day's ride south of New Hope with their young children, his grandchildren. The thought struck Running Wolf with such force that he had to steady himself against the porch post. A father. A grandfather. Roles he had never imagined for himself. Identities that seemed impossible for a man who had lived as a warrior, as a leader of raids, as a solitary figure moving like a shadow across the plains. The foal nudged his hand, its message clear. There was no time to waste in doubt or fear. "You're right," Running Wolf said softly, stroking its muzzle. "I have already lost too many years." He made his way to where Thunder waited on the outskirts of town, the stallion alert and ready after a night's rest. Before mounting, Running Wolf removed his medicine bundle from its hiding place in his saddlebag. For days he had kept it concealed, fearing its discovery would mark him instantly as Apache, and now he deliberately hung it around his neck, letting it rest openly against his chest. If he was to meet his daughter, it would be as himself, Running Wolf, Apache chief, not some nameless half-breed passing through town. The morning sun caught the silver arrowhead that still hung from the foal's neck, making it gleam like a beacon. Running Wolf touched the star chart in his pocket, remembering another promise made under the vast desert sky. "I will find my way back to you through our daughter," he whispered, the words meant for Sarah's spirit. "I will know her as you knew her. I will love her as you loved her. This I swear by the stars that connect us still." Mounting Thunder, Running Wolf turned toward Li Wei's home. Before seeking Aita, he needed the final piece of Sarah's story, whatever truth the Chinese woman had deemed too significant to share in their first meeting. The foal trotted alongside, no longer following but accompanying, a partner in this journey that had begun with a simple pursuit across the desert and had become a path to redemption, to family, to a future Running Wolf had never dared to imagine. "She always intended to tell you herself." Li Wei poured tea into small cups with practiced precision, her movements economical yet graceful despite her age. "Each year she would say, 'Perhaps this is when he will return.'" But time passed, as it always does. They sat in Li Wei's small kitchen, morning light filtering through lace curtains. Running Wolf held the delicate cup awkwardly, his large hands more accustomed to weapons than porcelain. Why did she not seek me out? The question had haunted him through the night of reading letters. "She knew where my people camped." Li Wei's expression softened. "At first she believed you dead. By the time she learned otherwise, she had Aita to consider." She sipped her tea thoughtfully. An Apache camp was no place for a half-white child in those days. Nor was an Apache warrior father a safe connection for a young girl growing up on the frontier. The truth of her words stung, but Running Wolf could not deny them. Those had been violent years, with tensions high between his people and the settlers. Zara had made the only choice she could to protect their daughter. "There is something you should see before you seek out Aita," Li Wei continued. "Something Sarah asked me to show you when the time came." She rose and disappeared into another room, returning with a bundle wrapped in faded calico. With reverent hands, she placed it on the table and carefully unfolded the fabric. Inside lay an Apache cradleboard, intricately carved cedar backing with a protective hood, decorated with beadwork patterns in blue and white, tiny shells sewn along the edges, protective symbols burned into the wood. Running Wolf's breath caught. He recognized the craftsmanship immediately, his own mother's work. He had given this to Sarah when she first told him of her pregnancy, retrieving it secretly from his mother's belongings after her death. She kept it hidden for years, Li Wei explained. Too dangerous to display, too precious to destroy. When Ayita was expecting her first child, Sarah finally felt it was time to pass it on. Her dark eyes studied Running Wolf's reaction. "Your grandchild has slept in this cradle, Chief. Your blood continues." Running Wolf touched the beadwork with trembling fingers, tracing patterns his mother had created decades earlier. The continuity stunned him. His mother's craft cradling his grandchild across generations that should never have connected. "Sarah's final wish was for reconciliation," Li Wei continued. "Not just between you and the daughter you never knew, but within yourself. She saw the pain you carried even 20 years ago. She hoped that knowing Ayita might help heal what was broken in you." Running Wolf carefully rewrapped the cradleboard. "Where will I find my daughter?" "That is the final piece I must share." Li Wei's expression grew solemn. "Before seeking Ayita, Sarah believed you should return to where it began, the homestead, the children's graves. She left something there meant only for your eyes, something she could not entrust to paper or to me." "I have already been to the homestead," Running Wolf said, confusion furrowing his brow, not to the place she intended. Li Wei withdrew a small map from her apron pocket. "This marks a location half a mile beyond the graves, where a distinctive rock formation creates a natural shelter. Sarah called it the meeting place. She said you would remember it." The description sparked immediate recognition. A secluded grotto where they had sheltered during a sudden thunderstorm, where they had first shared their bodies as well as their hearts. Their true beginning, what did she leave there? "That I cannot say. Sarah kept some secrets even from me." Li Wei refolded the map and handed it to Running Wolf. "She only said that after you found it, you would understand everything. Why she kept Ayita hidden, why she finally sent the Foal to find you. Why now, after all these years?" Running Wolf accepted the map, tucking it securely inside his shirt. "And Ayita, does she know of me?" "She knows her father was Apache. She knows her mother loved him until her dying day." Li Wei's gaze was direct, unflinching. "She does not know you still live, nor that you are coming." Sarah believed that choice, whether to seek a relationship with a daughter who has built a life without you, should be yours to make after you understood everything. Outside, thunder nickered softly. The foal, which had waited patiently in Li Wei's small garden, rose to its feet as if sensing decisions had been made. "I will return to the homestead first," Running Wolf said, rising from his chair. The path ahead was suddenly clear. "And then I will seek my daughter." Li Wei walked him to the door. "Sarah believed you would come. Even in her final days, when fever took much of her reason, she insisted the foal would find you, bring you home." She smiled faintly. "I thought it the wishful thinking of a dying woman. I have never been so glad to be proven wrong." As Running Wolf mounted Thunder, the morning sun caught the silver arrowhead around the foal's neck, making it gleam. The animal gazed at him with those intelligent eyes, as if asking if he finally understood its purpose. "Yes, little one," Running Wolf said softly. "Now I understand. Lead me back to the beginning, so I may find my way to the end of Sarah's story." Together they rode out of New Hope, heading west toward the homestead, toward the hidden grotto where, 20 years earlier, a warrior and a settler woman had created a love that transcended the boundaries of their separate worlds. The journey back to the homestead took less time than before, Running Wolf riding with purpose, rather than the reluctant approach of his first visit. As they crossed the familiar terrain, he noticed details missed previously, signs of regular travel along certain paths, branches trimmed to ease passage, stones arranged to mark turns that might be missed in poor weather. Sarah had maintained these trails for years, creating a safe route between her new life and the place where their paths had first crossed. When they reached the homestead, Running Wolf paused to visit the twin graves, now properly encircled with the stones he had gathered. He spoke briefly to the spirits of the children, telling them of their sister who had survived, promising to connect the separated parts of their family at last. The foal waited with unusual impatience, eager to continue to the destination marked on Li Wei's map. Running Wolf mounted Thunder once more, following the animal as it picked its way along a narrow deer trail leading away from the homestead toward the western hills. The landscape grew more dramatic as they ascended. Red rock formations thrusting upward from the earth, juniper trees clinging to precarious ledges, the air growing cooler with elevation. Running Wolf recognized landmarks from hunting expeditions long past, from secret meetings with a golden-haired woman who had fearlessly followed him into territory few settlers dared to enter. As they rounded a sharp bend, the distinctive formation came into view, a massive red rock split by ancient forces, creating a sheltered grotto invisible from the plains below. The meeting place, as Sarah had called it, the beginning. The foal trotted forward without hesitation, disappearing into the narrow entrance. Running Wolf dismounted, securing Thunder to a stunted pine before following. Inside, the temperature dropped immediately, the thick stone walls providing relief from the afternoon sun. The grotto opened into a roughly circular space, perhaps 30 feet across, with a natural stone shelf along one wall and a small spring bubbling from the rock face opposite the entrance. Light filtered through a narrow crack in the ceiling, illuminating the center of the space while leaving the edges in shadow. 20 years ago, he and Sarah had sheltered here during a sudden thunderstorm, the unexpected downpour trapping them for 3 days. They had built a small fire, shared their limited provisions, and talked through the long hours, she teaching him English words, he explaining Apache beliefs. When the physical attraction that had simmered between them finally ignited, it was on a bed of pine boughs gathered from the slopes outside. The space was different now, obviously maintained, with a small stone fire ring in the center, a wooden box tucked against one wall, even a rough-hewn bench placed to catch the shaft of sunlight. Sarah had transformed their chance shelter into a deliberate retreat. The foal stood beside the wooden box, watching expectantly as Running Wolf approached. With careful hands, he lifted the lid, revealing contents that told the story Sarah had wanted him to understand. A leather-bound journal, larger than the one Henderson had given him. A small pouch of dried herbs he recognized as those used by Apache women during childbirth. A tiny buckskin shirt sized for an infant. And beneath these, wrapped in soft cloth, a stone knife with turquoise inlay, the ceremonial blade his father had given him when he became a warrior. Running Wolf lifted the knife with reverent hands. He had given it to Sarah before the raid, wanting her to have protection in his absence. Now he understood its true purpose, from the herbs and the context. This knife had been used to cut the umbilical cord when Sarah gave birth to Ayita. His father's blade had welcomed his daughter into the world. He unwrapped the journal with trembling fingers, opening to the first page where Sarah's handwriting flowed across the paper. "I write this account for you, my wolf, so that if the stars ever guide you back to me, you will know the complete truth of what happened after the raid. After our worlds were torn apart, the journal detailed everything: Sarah's desperate flight from the burning homestead, her discovery of one twin still alive in her womb after the stress of the raid had triggered early labor, her journey to a remote cabin where an elderly midwife agreed to help despite the obvious mixed parentage of the expected child. It described Ayita's birth during a thunderstorm much like the one that had first stranded them in this very grotto. How Sarah had used Running Wolf's knife in the Apache tradition he had described to her, cutting the cord and offering the first prayer to the ancestors in her imperfect grasp of his language. Most importantly, it explained why she had kept their daughter hidden, not just from the prejudice of settlers who would reject a half-Apache child, but from Apache scouts who occasionally ventured near settlements. Sarah had recognized some as members of Running Wolf's band, had even glimpsed Running Wolf himself once from a distance, leading warriors on a raid against a cavalry patrol. She had made the agonizing choice to protect their daughter from both worlds that would reject her, building instead a third path, neither fully white nor Apache, but something new, something that honored both heritages while acknowledging the impossible divide between them. The final pages of the journal had been written in a shakier hand, dated just months before her death. They contained detailed directions to the Cooper Ranch, descriptions of Aita and her family, and a single, heart-rending plea. Find her, my love. Find our daughter. Tell her that she comes from love, not violence, that her father was not just a warrior but a poet, a healer, a man of wisdom. Give her the heritage I could only describe but never fully provide. Complete the circle that began in this sacred place, where two worlds met and created something beautiful. The foal's insistent nudging drew Running Wolf's attention from Sarah's journal. The animal pawed at the stone floor near the rear wall of the grotto, where shadows gathered thickest. Rising stiffly, Running Wolf approached, running his hands along the rough rock surface. His fingers found what eyes alone might miss, a slight indentation, a seam not made by nature. Pressing carefully, he felt the section give slightly, a hidden door, crafted to blend with the surrounding stone. Another secret, he murmured, working his fingers into the narrow gap and pulling gently. The stone panel pivoted on hidden hinges, revealing a small cache hollowed from the living rock. Inside sat a cedar chest, its surface polished by years of handling, brass hinges glinting in the dim light. Running Wolf lifted it carefully, surprised by its weight. The chest was simply but beautifully made, the kind of craftsmanship that spoke of care and intention. On its lid, carved in flowing script, was a single word: remember. He carried it to the shaft of sunlight penetrating the grotto's ceiling, settling cross-legged on the ground before opening the lid. Inside lay objects carefully arranged, each one wrapped in soft cloth or paper, each representing a piece of the life he had missed. A lock of dark hair tied with blue ribbon, Aita's first haircut, according to the small note attached. A child's, drawing of three figures, tall woman with yellow hair, small girl with dark braids, and a man in what appeared to be a Apache dress standing slightly apart. Beneath it, in a child's uneven script, my family, a pressed flower from each year of Aita's life, labeled with her age and a brief description of the milestone it commemorated. Age 7, first day of school. Age 12, one spelling contest. Age 16, first dance. Running Wolf handled each item with reverence, piecing together the life of the daughter he had never known through these sacred objects Sarah had preserved. His throat tightened as he reached deeper into the chest, finding evidence of the careful way Sarah had maintained his presence in their daughter's life, despite his physical absence. Near the bottom, a small velvet pouch contained a pair of silver hair combs, exquisitely crafted with flowing designs of leaves and vines. A note in Sarah's hand explained, "I wore these on my wedding day to Thomas, who accepted Aita as his own. I leave them for our granddaughter Lily to wear on her wedding day, both worlds united in one beautiful child, a granddaughter named Lily." The knowledge struck Running Wolf with physical force. Not just a daughter, but a granddaughter, and perhaps other grandchildren as well. An entire branch of family he had never known existed. Beneath the final layers of carefully preserved memories lay a sealed envelope addressed simply, "For Running Wolf, read last." Inside was a letter written in Sarah's hand, dated just weeks before her death. "My dearest Wolf, if you are reading this, then the impossible has happened. The Foal found you. You returned to the beginning. You know about our daughter and the life we might have shared. I do not write to burden you with regret or to ask forgiveness for keeping Aita hidden. We each did what we believed necessary in a world that gave us impossible choices. Instead, I write with a request. Ayita knows she is half Apache. She knows her birth father was a chief, a warrior, a man of honor. What she does not know is that you still live, that you never knew of her existence. This knowledge I leave in your hands. If you choose to remain anonymous, reading these memories but keeping your distance, I will understand. Our daughter has built a good life. She is strong, wise, and loved. But if you choose to reveal yourself, to complete the circle that began in this sacred place, I ask only this: approach with gentleness. Ayita has Thomas's name and his love, but she has your blood, your spirit, your eyes that see beyond the surface of things. The Foal will guide you to her, born of Spirit Dancer's line, raised from birth to recognize your scent, your voice, trained to find you wherever you might be. My final gift to you both: whatever you decide, know that I loved you until my final breath. That in another life, perhaps, the stars might have aligned differently, with eternal love. Sarah. Running Wolf carefully refolded the letter, his vision blurred by tears he no longer tried to contain. The choice Sarah offered was no choice at all. Having come this far, having learned of Ayita's existence, how could he not seek her out? How could he not attempt to know the daughter who carried his blood, his spirit? The Foal whickered softly from the entrance to the grotto, as if sensing his decision and approving. Running Wolf carefully repacked the cedar chest, securing each precious item, each memory Sarah had preserved. This chest belonged not to him, but to Ayita, another piece of her heritage that had been kept safe until the time was right. As he rose to his feet, Running Wolf felt a profound shift within himself, the warrior chief giving way to something he had never expected to become. A father seeking reconciliation, a grandfather hoping for acceptance. His hand went to the silver arrowhead he now wore alongside his medicine bundle, the twin to the one that still hung around the foal's neck. "Thank you, Sarah," he whispered to the silent stones that had witnessed their beginning, "for keeping faith when I could not, for preserving what I would have lost." Outside, the afternoon light had softened toward evening. Running Wolf secured the cedar chest behind Thunder's saddle, his mind already turning toward the journey ahead. According to Sarah's directions, the Cooper Ranch lay a day's ride south, close enough that he could arrive by midday tomorrow if they traveled at dawn. The foal pranced impatiently, eager to complete its mission. Running Wolf mounted Thunder, chest tight with anticipation and fear. "Lead on," he told the foal. "Take me to my daughter." The Cooper Ranch emerged from morning mist as Running Wolf crested a gentle rise, a substantial homestead with a two-story house, large barn, corrals, and outbuildings spread across a verdant valley. Smoke rose from the chimney, cattle grazed on distant hillsides, and the sounds of domestic life carried on the clear air. Running Wolf reined Thunder to a stop, suddenly unable to advance. After days of determined pursuit, the moment of truth loomed before him like an unscalable cliff. What right did he have to disrupt this peaceful existence? What place could an aging Apache warrior claim in the life of a woman who had never known him? The foal, sensing his hesitation, circled back from where it had trotted ahead. Its eyes held that same knowing look that had first unsettled him days ago, a wisdom beyond its years, a purpose beyond animal understanding. It whickered softly, nudging his leg as if in encouragement. From the cedar chest secured behind his saddle, Running Wolf withdrew a small object wrapped in soft buckskin, a pair of beaded moccasins he had crafted as a young warrior, given to Sarah during their time together. According to her journal, Ayita now wore these for special occasions, connecting unconsciously to her Apache heritage through the work of her father's hands. The knowledge that his daughter had walked in footwear he had made had worn his craftsmanship. Against her skin, without knowing its origin, gave Running Wolf the courage to continue. He tucked the moccasins inside his shirt and urged Thunder forward, the foal trotting confidently ahead. As they approached the ranch yard, activity ceased. A man by the corral straightened, hand moving instinctively toward the rifle leaning against the fence. A woman stepped onto the porch, shading her eyes against the morning sun. Children playing near a water pump froze, staring at the unusual sight of an elderly Apache approaching their home. Running Wolf kept his hands visible, his posture non-threatening. The medicine bundle and silver arrowhead hung openly around his neck, declaring his identity without apology. He stopped Thunder at a respectful distance, studying the woman on the porch with hungry eyes. Ayita Cooper stood straight and proud, her dark hair streaked with early silver, her features a haunting blend of Sarah's delicacy and his own stronger lines. She wore a simple dress, practical for ranch life, with a beaded belt that showed subtle Apache influence. Her eyes, his eyes, regarded him with cautious curiosity. "Can we help you?" called the man by the corral, moving to stand protectively near the porch steps. James Cooper, Running Wolf presumed. Husband, father, rancher, his hand still resting near his weapon, but not yet grasping it. Before Running Wolf could respond, the foal broke away, trotting directly to Ayita with clear recognition. The woman's expression shifted from caution to surprise as the animal approached without fear, stopping at the bottom of the porch steps. "Spirits Foal," she murmured, loud enough for Running Wolf to hear. Her gaze lifted from the animal to its companion, confusion evident in her features. "You found him!" The simple statement confirmed what Running Wolf had hoped, that Ayita knew of her mother's final plan, understood the significance of the foal's mission. He dismounted slowly, maintaining distance, respecting boundaries that might exist. "I am Running Wolf," he said, his English careful but clear, the language Sarah had taught him in stolen hours beneath desert stars. "I believe I am your father." A small gasp escaped Ayita's lips. Her hand went to her throat where, Running Wolf now noticed, hung a small turquoise pendant, another piece of his past, another connection maintained across decades of separation. "Mother said you were dead," she said, her voice steady despite the shock evident in her eyes. "She told me you died in the raid before I was born." She believed this to be true for many years. Running Wolf took a single step forward, no more. When she learned otherwise, she made choices to protect you from a world that would not accept a child of two bloods. James Cooper moved to stand beside his wife, his posture still wary, but his expression thoughtful rather than hostile. "Sarah said the foal would find someone important. Before she died," he glanced at his wife, "she never said it would be your birth father, because she left the choice to me," Running Wolf explained. "Whether to remain a shadow in your past or to step into the light of knowing." Ayita descended the porch steps slowly, her movements deliberate, controlled. The foal remained at her side as she approached Running Wolf, studying his features with intense focus. She stopped an arm's length away, close enough to see the truth written in the lines of his face, the set of his jaw, the shape of his eyes that matched her own. "I have questions," she said simply. Running Wolf nodded. "I have come to answer them if you will hear me." A small figure darted from the porch, a girl of perhaps 5 years, with dark braids and curious eyes. She halted beside Ayita, looking up at Running Wolf without fear. "Who is he, Mama?" the child asked, her voice carrying clearly in the morning air. Ayita placed a protective hand on her daughter's shoulder, but her gaze never left Running Wolf's face. Something shifted in her expression, a softening, a recognition, perhaps the stirring of a connection that transcended the years of absence. "This is your grandfather," she said finally. The words both a concession and an invitation. "He has come a very long way to meet us." The child, Lily, Running Wolf realized, the granddaughter for whom Sarah had saved the silver combs, tilted her head, studying him with innocent curiosity. "Do you tell stories?" she asked suddenly. Grandmother Sarah said my Apache grandfather knew all the best stories about stars and animals and brave warriors. Despite himself, Running Wolf smiled, the first genuine smile to cross his features in longer than he could remember. "Yes, little one," he said softly. "I know many stories, stories that belong to you as much as they belong to me." Ayita's hand tightened momentarily on her daughter's shoulder, then relaxed. The decision made visible in that simple gesture. "Come inside," she said, her voice carrying the weight of 2 decades of questions. "We have much to talk about." Sunset painted the western sky in brilliant hues of orange and gold as Running Wolf stood on the porch of the Cooper Ranch, watching his granddaughter Lily lead the foal around the yard. The animal followed the child with gentle patience, its mission fulfilled, yet its presence still essential, a living bridge between worlds that had seemed impossibly distant just days before. Behind him, the murmur of voices drifted through the open door, Ayita and James, discussing in private the revelations of the day. Running Wolf had told his story without embellishment or excuse, answering questions about his life with Sarah, about the raid that separated them, about the decades spent believing all had been lost. In turn, Ayita had shared glimpses of her life, growing up with Sarah's careful guidance, learning of her dual heritage through stories and small traditions maintained in secret, finding acceptance with Thomas Miller, who raised her as his own, and later with James, who embraced her mixed blood without reservation. The cedar chest now rested on the Cooper family table, its contents spread out for Ayita to examine, the physical record of a mother's love and determination to preserve connections that circumstances had severed. Running Wolf had watched his daughter's fingers trace the same objects his had touched in the grotto, had seen recognition, grief, and wonder move across her features. Not all wounds could be healed in a day. Not all questions could be answered in a single conversation. But a beginning had been made, fragile yet real, tentative yet honest. From his medicine pouch, Running Wolf withdrew items gathered during his morning walk: a perfect eagle feather found beneath a solitary pine, strands of sweetgrass harvested from a hidden meadow, a small amount of ceremonial tobacco carried since leaving his people. With practiced hands he began crafting a blessing tie, murmuring ancient prayers as he worked. This sacred object would remain with the Cooper family after his departure, a protective talisman connecting them to their Apache heritage, to the ancestors who watched from beyond the veil of stars. The first of many such gifts he hoped to share as they cautiously built a relationship across the divide of years. The door opened behind him. Running Wolf turned to find Ayita standing in the threshold, her expression thoughtful as she observed his work. "Mother used to make something similar," she said, moving to stand beside him. "On special days, births, marriages, times of trouble, she called them spirit anchors." Running Wolf nodded, continuing to bind the eagle feather with sinew. She remembered well. "These connect us to those who have walked before, those who will come after. They remind us that no soul stands truly alone." Ayita watched his hands move with the ease of long practice. "James and I have been talking," she said after a moment. "We'd like you to stay. Not just overnight, but for a time. The children should know their grandfather. I should know my father." The simple words carried enormous weight. Running Wolf's hands stilled momentarily as he absorbed their meaning, their gift. "My people expect me at council," he said slowly. "I left without explanation when the foal appeared." "Send word," Ayita suggested. "Surely after 20 years, a few more weeks can be spared." Running Wolf studied his daughter's face, the strength evident in her jaw, the intelligence in her eyes, the quiet determination that reminded him powerfully of Sarah. "Yes," he agreed finally. "A few weeks can be spared," Ayita smiled, a small expression but genuine. "Lily has already asked for 3 different stories about the stars. I think she would request one every night if permitted. Then she shall have them," Running Wolf promised, finishing the blessing tie with a final knot. "And stories of her grandmother, of the brave woman who kept faith when others would have faltered." He held out the completed blessing tie. Ayita accepted it with appropriate reverence, recognizing its significance without needing explanation. Another piece of heritage reclaimed, another connection restored. "Mother left something for you," she said, reaching into her pocket. "She asked me to give it to the Apache who follows the Foal, should such a person ever appear. I didn't understand then. I do now." She placed a small object in Running Wolf's palm, a carved wooden horse, small enough to fit in his closed fist. He recognized his own handiwork, a gift made for Sarah during their time together, a promise of the life they had imagined building. "She kept it always," Ayita said softly, "even during her marriage to Thomas, even as she aged and grew ill. Said it represented hope that could never be extinguished." Running Wolf closed his fingers around the carving, feeling the smooth wood worn by decades of handling. "Your mother was the bravest person I have ever known," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Braver than any warrior in battle." The setting sun cast their shadows long across the porch, father and daughter standing side by side after decades apart. Inside, James was calling the children for the evening meal. Lily's laughter rang clear as she gave the foal a final pat and raced toward the house. "Will you join us?" Ayita asked, gesturing toward the door. Running Wolf tucked the wooden horse into his shirt pocket near his heart. "Yes," he said simply. "I would be honored." As they turned toward the warm light spilling from the Cooper home, Running Wolf felt Sarah's presence as surely as if she stood beside them, her spirit watching as the separate worlds she had bridged throughout her life finally, beautifully merged. The journey he had begun when a persistent foal followed his horse across the desert was ending. Another journey, perhaps more challenging but infinitely more rewarding, was just beginning.